Good morning, everybody. Welcome to today's Q&A stream. What this is a kind of a culmination. It's kind of a bonus stream. Oh, apologies. I have some audio coming back at me. It's my fault. Sorry. So, what this stream today is about is a kind of a bonus. We weren't necessarily intending to do this, but the outreach and the engagement was so strong on all the streams that took place before and then the webinar itself. Particularly around the questions being posed in the webinar. I think, and Laura, as you'll see here, is joining me from that webinar. I think we had over 45 questions or something like that in the hour session that we ran. So definitely the engagement was great and we want to touch on that. The topics that we've been covering as a recap for those that may not have seen all those streams or been involved in the conversation from the start, we've touched on topics such as engagement, about what parts of the learning process do we engage and what are the best potential modalities or ways that we can raise that engagement. We've looked at data analytics and the way that can help us evidence where we might do something or how we are moving the needle potentially. We've looked at topics across a wide array of areas and frankly a lot of these questions today touch into a variety of those. And I think what today serves is that kind of final point really on what we've been discussing, which is how are we in this new world of COVID and how it's changed everything with remote working and everything else that different industries have felt. How are we coping and what are we looking to do in the future and how are we moving forward? So without spending too long talking about that, I'm going to hand over to my friend and guest of many sessions on the stream, Laura here, you can see on screen, and she's been over the last week or so putting out some questions on LinkedIn that you probably have seen. Some of you and hopefully many of you have responded to. So let's kind of delve into the findings that she's been doing. And also I'm encouraging people to reach out via the chat and get involved and ask us any more questions that you might have that you want a point of view on. This is about collaboration, sharing ideas, so please do that. But Laura, I suppose over to you with question one. Unless you want to keep going, just doing a bit of an introduction as to your thought process on how you came to the questions that you came to.
Well, actually, I didn't come to these questions. These questions actually came, Tom, to us via the webinar. So what we were looking at the webinar was the whole area of creating learning for the new world of work. What does that look like when we've got so much remote working, so much uncertainty, so much work-life balance that's been changing. So, and in that webinar itself, what we uncovered was a number of different themes. We looked at perhaps redefining what flexible learning is. Is it something that's current, something that's convenient, something that's connected, so that learning isn't just about courses and online courses, but really thinking about flexibility. The other thing that we covered in the webinar is the fact that we have to be much more proactive in listening and tuning into the world around us, and using the data, using the insights to really make connections and create the right kind of solutions for the organisation that we're working with, even though we're dispersed now. And then the last thing we looked at was value. And as a result of that, Tom, as you say, we had lots and lots of questions come in, and we started to tackle some of them, but we realised that perhaps we didn't tackle every single one of them. So I know that you flagged a few as well as me. So what was the first one you wanted to tackle here today, Tom?
So the first one that should just be popping up onto people's screens momentarily is remote working. It means less time. How do we change these priorities?
Oh yeah, this was such a theme, wasn't it?
Very much so. My take on this is that it's interesting people say remote time means less working. I have never known a time where people say they have free time to do learning. So it's always the biggest pushback. I see L&D functions say, people say they've got no time. I speak to businesses and say, people have no time to learn. But when you actually speak to individuals specifically, I know within there are obviously variances at that point, but most people are learning in some way, shape, or form, even if it's that they are looking at YouTube on the way into the office, or maybe not quite that now. But the idea that we don't learn or have any time to learn has always, for me, been a funny one, and I don't quite square with that. But I think that the second point is probably more to it: is how do we change the priorities, or also recognise that learning takes place in other areas apart from just traditionally in a classroom, or let's say now on an e-learning course. There are lots of opportunities to learn, even if it takes a few seconds. Yeah, so it's a kind of a weird question for me. But one of the things that I've seen, and we touched on this on the modalities stream, which was there are a huge amount of ways that you can connect to people. Some will suit others and some won't. But for me, it would be looking at the information that you've got, the data on who's engaging, what people are asking for, potentially where they're spending their time when they're at home, like on platform on their machines. What are they doing? Are they in, say, Teams, for example? Push content to them in Teams. I think it's about an understanding of the new working practices and behaviours, and then finding ways to inject learning in those places that they work. That'd be my take if I was trying to look for a quick fix.
Yeah, no, I think you're right. And I think what was really interesting for me when we posted this question up on LinkedIn, a lot of people didn't quite relate to it, because they were saying that actually those that have already started the route to doing online learning, online communities, were finding that their usage and their engagement with those platforms was going through the roof during this process. But I think this is a really important question. Somebody was asking this for a reason, and I think the reason is that historically, when we have created content, we haven't necessarily been tuning in. And I reflected on some of the research work that I'd done, was that less than 25% of us are actually talking to our individuals, our workers, up front to find out what kind of learning that they need to do, and what will work for them. So we're not tuning in, and therefore we're not necessarily creating the kind of content that is most useful for them now. And again, when I've done research directly with workers, about 50,000 of them, over 70% say the reason that they go themselves to these platforms, to Google, to YouTube, to the sorts of things that you're talking about, Tom, is because they want to be able to do their jobs faster and better.
Yep.
And I think in this new work environment, people are finding ways to connect, to learn. But if they're not connecting with what we are providing for them, maybe there's a mismatch in our relevance. Maybe there's a mismatch in us then being able to find what it is that we've done for them. So I think we need to perhaps be looking at, rather than changing their priority, take a look at ourselves first.
Yeah.
Is what we're doing relevant? Is it timely? And can they find it? That's the most important. Is it useful, and can they find it? And if both of those questions are right, and then go back to learners and start listening again, say, okay, what haven't we quite got right here? Because what we do know from their own behaviour is that they are connecting now, or engaging with the stuff that is meaningful for them right now. So just tune in, just tune into that. Yeah. So that's one of the things that I would say. Don't try and change them, but try and tune into them. Tom, I know there was another question coming through as well.
I agree with that completely. Yeah, and the next question, which I would say possibly the most asked question, which is, is face-to-face learning dead? You got some response to this one, didn't you? Some strong response. So maybe you'd start with that, I suppose.
I think it was amazing. I would encourage you, we won't spend a lot of time on this one now, but I would encourage you to go onto the LinkedIn chat under Laura Overton, because it was very clear that learning professionals do not believe that the face-to-face learning course was dead, or face-to-face training in its old style may be on its last leg. Some people say it was dormant, some say was stagnant. Some said it was in need of incubation at the moment. But there was a lot of talk about the humanity of learning. And I absolutely agree with that. I think that it's absolutely critical that we understand that learning is a human process. We start to do it as soon as we're born. We probably do it before we're born. But humanity, I would like to suggest, is not necessarily only through face-to-face interventions where we're actually physically connected. And I think over the last number of weeks, what we've certainly seen is how technology has allowed us to be more human, allowed us to be more connected with other people. We haven't been as isolated as we could have been. So I think that's one of the things that we need to be thinking about. And the other thing that we think about with face-to-face is that a lot of people are saying, and I agree with this, is that using face-to-face just to deliver information, deliver content is not enough. We need to really look at what it is that is most powerful about the intervention. And it was interesting, I was listening to David James' podcast, the L&D podcast with Tracy Waters, revisiting some of my favourite episodes during this lockdown. And Tracy at Sky, amazing what she's doing. And she looked at the face-to-face and she said, actually, there are 4 R's, and I probably can't remember all of them right now, but when connecting is relevant, whether it's for recognition, whether it's for reflection, and I can't even remember all of the 4 R's, but there are 4 key areas where we can really benefit, and that doesn't necessarily mean a course. So when we're looking at blends, we need to be thinking about what is the true and unique value of being face to face with each other. Is it for that recognition? Is it for that reflection? Is it for those types of things? And then use that in with the blend, and then you maybe harness some of those other modalities, Tom, that you've been talking about, to bring some of those other elements of learning. So perhaps the traditional face-to-face learning where we all come in for a week, 2 weeks, may have been gone, but it will breathe new life into the face-to-face interventions that we have moving forward. It's a chance, as we mentioned on the webinar, to deconstruct what really works, what's really high performing about our interventions, and to work out new ways to bring that into the fore in this new world. So, but the LinkedIn responses were far more eloquent than mine. So, and the 4 full R's are on there as well. So.
I think as well what we might see immediately after COVID, lockdown measures reduce. I know it's a gradual process for a lot of us, but when we can start to travel and meet up more closely, so when the social distancing ends, we might see that there's a real, desire for people to actually meet and do face-to-face training. And what I would say is, to Laura's point, the way that we deliver that, we have an opportunity to make it meaningful, and not just transmitting or going back to the old ways. But people will truly be engaged, and we've all delivered or been on training where you go along and there's frankly only 30% of the room potentially is participating in the open discussions, and some people feel like they're there just because they've been told to go to this training. And I think moving forward, I don't think it's dead. I think it's just changed, which is what to Laura's point. I just think when it does come back, we have an opportunity to make it better than it ever was before, and use it to drive or create an experience for people. Whereas I think, I hold my hands up to this as well, maybe, it was easy just to transmit information in those scenarios sometimes, rather than do something meaningful with the time that we have together. And if anything of this COVID, is the silver lining is that I think everybody now appreciates the value of face-to-face or, person-to-person contact. And so these, when we can go back to doing some face-to-face content, hopefully that remains true, that people do value that, and hopefully we can get more out of doing the face-to-face stuff that we were doing before. So presents an opportunity as well.
Yeah, absolutely.
So after we've dealt with this, this is the face-to-face learning dead, like obviously the biggest question of our times. We have maybe something that's a bit more niche here. So question came in, which was which is the best CPD for me to do as an L&D practitioner. So this is less about obviously less about your learner audience and more about you as an individual. How can you become better at your job? Which I thought was a good way to look at it. At least it shows that people are wanting to continue their own professional development and learning themselves, which is great to see.
Yeah. Yeah, I think you're absolutely right there, and I think the irony wasn't lost on me where we actually uncovered the fact that sort of like we're saying, oh, people are willing to learn, and yet we're also saying, but I've got time on my hands and I'm willing to learn. um, and that sense of, where do we go next? What are the new skills? Now, there are some really practical skills that were raised in the in the LinkedIn discussion that we had. Skills around moving on to technology, skills around data, and some of the stuff that you were sharing, Tom, in the previous live sessions are really significant with that. So for me, it's about sort of us bringing up our skills, but the responses to the question about face-to-face learning also made me think about our own professional development. Sometimes also means letting go of what we were good at in the past. And this is about stretching ourselves. This is about experimentation. This is about being vulnerable. And, many of us are very familiar with, for example, the classroom. And that's why the majority of the responses were, no, the classroom's not dead. But I wondered how much is it because we didn't want it to be dead, because the next phase of our own professional development might mean actually perhaps letting go some of the things that we've been good at in the past in order to embrace new skills, new way of thinking. Our listening skills, I think, are absolutely critical. We've talked about this before. Our business acumen is absolutely critical. Our ability to understand and to read what's going on in our organisation and the way that our organisations are reforming and doubling up. That business acumen, I think, is going to be absolutely critical. A friend of mine, Jos Sarets from the 70-20-10 Institute, recently said, as learning professionals, we shouldn't be reading so many learning books. Maybe we should be reading more business books. And I think that is going to be something that's going to be very important in terms of our leadership, our contribution back to business. And that's something that we can work on. But, professionalism, I think, is absolutely critical for us. If we want to be taken credibly, and we're not just going to be an e-learning provider or a course provider, then we have to really own our profession and own what's going on in our profession. The CIPD are doing an amazing piece of work on professionalising the industry. Lots of free resources that are there. So don't go too niche. This is a time perhaps to go more broader and wider. And I think that there are new skills that we can learn from other disciplines as well to spark our creativity. Disciplines, if you're more data oriented, like data analytics, or if you're creative, maybe from marketing. So let's think broader, let's think wider, but let's believe and know that we are professionals as well and really understand how people learn, how adults learn, pedagogy, pedagogy, all of those things. Let's just use this time to refresh ourselves and think, well, how do I do that differently? And remember, that was the Mercedes example that the chief engineer that we used in the webinar was saying, this downtime, this moment where there isn't so much change going on in the industry, how do they're not just happy to keep things the same, but how do they deconstruct what they already did well, and how can they work out ways of continually improving that and continue getting fresh inspiration. So I think, yes, let's use this chance to think, to reflect, and to experiment, try new things. This is a great time for experimentation. So that would be my answer for CPD.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Simple as that.
If only.
Exactly. Remember, everybody, there's the chat function. So if you have any questions or any thoughts on what's being said, please do to contribute there on the right hand side of the page. That'd be really good. So question 4, Laura. Interesting one as well. Again, focused more on L&D itself than maybe the audience and learning, which is nice to see, I think. So what value does L&D want to be known for? That's always an interesting question, because it depends upon the organisation in which you sit. But yeah, thoughts on this one? What was the feedback, and what are some takeaways that you've got from this one?
Well, this is an early one that's gone out. This one's only just gone out today,
Ah,
but it really reflected a lot of the themes, and several questions came up about this, about what value do we want to be known for, as a conversations about, often historically we've been very much the order taker, cost center in an organization. And certainly there is a tendency, and I have seen this having lived through a number of recessions and been working in the online learning world. There's a number of people who think, actually, we can add value by removing cost. How do we deliver more training, more courses, more interventions, more initiatives to more people for less money? And there's a kind of a cost element in there. And I think that historically, that's what we have been known for, even when we've made forays into the online learning world and that type of world. The biggest challenge with wanting to be a cost reduction, sort of like to bring just focus on efficiency, is the fact that we are then seen as a cost center, and in recessions, cost centers are removed. And certainly, when I started doing research into learning innovation back in 2002, it was on the back of a recession. It was on the back of the dot-com bubble bursting, and it was on the back of people who had rushed into online learning and then found that it wasn't working for them.
yeah.
This whole cost saving didn't work because nobody was using it. And yet, through my own experience, I had also found that some organizations were very, very successful. And then when I started to do that research, it was because they had realigned their concept of value. They had realigned from, rather than saying, how do I save money, to saying, okay, well, what is needed in my business right now? We're trying to sell more products. We're introducing new systems. Is something that I can do help my organization to roll out change faster, quicker, more efficiently? Can I get new teams up and running in contact centers faster, getting them creating their first sale faster? And what I found was that those organizations who were really successful were reshaping their view on value, reshaping their view on results. And they were focusing first on what results does the organization need to achieve? How do I work with the organization to achieve those results? And what unique contribution can I bring? And I think that would be a very healthy place for us to start. It's just almost, I know Bob Marshall's fond of quoting that disruption resets us to ground zero again. It gives us a chance to start again and to redefine what our value is. And I think historically leading up to this point, and the danger is that we'll go back to this, is that we have looked at our value in terms of trying to prove what we did was valuable.
Yeah.
And to validate ourselves, and through methodologies and return on investment and all of those kinds of things. But actually what we need to be starting at is, what value can I co-create with the organization? And that, to me, that is such a passion for me, because what I have found in all of my experience is that when we change that mindset from how can I prove that what I was doing was valuable, to how do I work with you in the business to create value for you, and work in partnership, then that means that the value that we create is co-created. And I think that is so important. And there's a real transition and shift in our mindset that's going to be needed to do that. And I think there's a lot of people out there who are talking about this and find it tough to do. But this is my passion, and this is a passion of many friends that I have around me. It's not about the tools, not about the technology, it's not even about the courses, but it's about the fact we uniquely believe that we can bring value back into the business. And it's up to you to define what that is by talking to the business and saying what's needed right now. Yeah. And that makes it an exciting time. So Tom, don't stop me, please stop me, because this is my heart. This is my DNA, and we could be doing this for a very, very long time. So please
No,
tell me
you're
to
fine.
on to the next one if you want to.
Like you, I hold the same passion because I think over the years that I've worked within L&D, we've seen organisations want to show. Oh, sorry, L&D functions want to show the value they deliver. But I think you're completely right. It's a mindset shift from justification to making yourselves integral to the running of an organisation. And if you do that, you use the word like partnering, or I think it was partnering you said with the business. And to me, that's the key. And we've always talked about proper business partnering not being the order takers, but how many of you can truly say that you are seen by those business functions as integral to delivering success? And that to me that's when you have to actually stop talking about value, because you're not then justifying your existence. What you're doing is, it's just a given that we need L&D to be able to communicate this change, to get people upskilled, to get everybody moving in the same direction on the same wavelength. It's not even a question about the value at that point, because you are so deeply embedded within the organisation, the culture, and things like that. And as to your point, and I'm using the word here, justification, but a lot of the time, L&D are trying to justify their existence when it shouldn't need to be the way. But for the way that L&D is perceived sometimes, not all the time, but sometimes, historically has made that reality. But you're right. It is. You got to be bold. You got to be. You'll be brave to kind of push out of that traditional view of L&D.
Yeah.
But you have a right to be, because L&D deliver huge value back to the organisations that they work with. So
I think there is a moment right now that talks about us reinventing learning and development and reimagining learning development, and I think that is we have talked about those moments for quite a long time now. Clark Quinn wrote about revolutionising learning and development. I've written about the new learning agenda, the new learning organisation. We've been talking. Now I think we're going to be going into a very tough time. Now is the time where we're going to have to tackle value head on in order to truly deliver value. We need to believe in ourselves that we can do that. And if this is not something that you're familiar with, contact those of us where this is our lifeline, and this is what we're doing all the time. So there are plenty of people out there to help you to move into that space. So don't be afraid. This is the time for boldness. So as I say, I told you to stop me, Tom.
I know I set you back off. Sorry, that was my fault. Final question then, because we wanted to make this not too long, like some of our other streams have gone just past the hour mark. So trying to finish the next 8 or so minutes, unless the chat suddenly blows up and starts asking us loads of questions. So final question, which we want to discuss today, which we saw a lot of, which was about compliance training, and will we need to reprioritize compliance?
Yeah, tough one, that one, because I remember Clive Shepherd, who has done some amazing work in his career. His contributions to the career have been incredible. But Clive Shepherd has actually flagged that compliance traditionally, nobody wanted to touch it. Nobody wanted to touch the mandated training, and that's why everyone shunted it onto online learning, because no classroom trainer wants to have people's eyes glaze over and how to repeat all of those areas. So for me, it's been very negative. The role of compliance training, it's seen our very worst of online learning design, and just ticking the boxes using the learning management systems to prove people have been through the courses. I think if there is a re-emergence of doing things well, doing things safely, making sure that everyone is on board with that, and I think we do need to relook at how we've done compliance training. We cannot do it the same way as we've done in the past, because now there is a hunger. We talked about a moment ago about business value. Before, business value was very much about sort of like, let's just prove it. Through,
Yeah.
we've got all these people through, and it's only cost us 2 pennies or 2 cents
Yeah.
to be able to do that. Now, this is, health and safety. This is a business issue right now. Do people feel safe enough to come back into work? Do our customers feel safe enough to interact and connect with us? Will they come back into our retail store rather than going to somebody else's because of the fact that they feel safe? Now there is purpose. Now there is meaning. Now there is motivation. So I think it's actually a time for us to absolutely look at how we support that process. But we cannot support it through the old ways of doing compliance training. We have to be thinking about the experiences. We have to attach ourselves to the emotion that people are feeling, and to work with individuals and to listen with individuals about what's needed, what will make them feel safe, and to use our experience, our professionalism, to be able to help them facilitate that transition for them. So I think compliance potentially is incredibly valuable, but if we do it wrong, then we will lose all value, and the organisation will work out how to do it for themselves.
Yeah.
And this conundrum of, how do we bring people up to speed and get them motivated and change behaviour, not just tick the box, is something that, as learning professionals, yes. That is my job. That is what I do. And I think we need to bring that fresh thinking to that. I did a research paper a number of years ago. It was after 5 years of research, called the Compliance Conundrum, about how we need to redesign and rethink learning. And it was based on 5 years research of organisations who had learned how to change behaviour through new types of learning design. So Google that. You'll probably find it on the Emerald Works website, but that hopefully will also give people a view. But we have to reprioritise how we focus on these issues, because they suddenly have become incredibly central to business.
Couldn't agree more. And I also think compliance training in the past hasn't necessarily been done, in the right way. I see it a lot on a day-to-day basis, where people say, "Oh, well, we've put people through this compliance training, and then we're going to test them again a year." But it's such a manufactured environment. So, kind of like my overriding thing, as I'll probably summarise at the end of this stream here, is there's an opportunity everywhere to improve what we do, and compliance is one of those areas, like Laura's saying, that if we don't seize the opportunity, we will compliance will just end up being what it was, and not a very actually good indicator of how compliant or not we are as organisations. Yeah, very interesting. We actually do have a comment in the chat as well. So there's a question in there, which is it's also the issue that L&D is aligned with the targets and directions of other organisations, not living its own. I assume that's life at the end there. And I've been thinking about this whilst Laura was talking a little bit, and I'm thinking, I get the point, and I think this really, Laura, is talking to your point about shifting mindset about value, because here is a question that's posed from a perspective as us and them, and I think it should more be like, why are the objectives of learning any different to those in those other parts of the organisation? Because surely you are succeeding and failing potentially, but hopefully succeeding together. And learning should be aligning to those parts of the organisation and delivering training and support in ways that will help them do those functions, do their job. So, for a sales function, if it's sell more, L&D should be helping people sell more, make better connections, make more meetings, build rapport better, but all the things that we associate with sales. So, to me, L&D should be, those objectives are L&Ds, if that makes sense.
Yeah. And I think you're absolutely right there, Tom, because we need to believe that we can add value into the business. We're part of a business. We're paid for. Our salaries are paid for in that business, in that organisation. So that we join organisations because we believe in where they're going and what they're doing. And therefore, we're all part of a team. And teams come together with their own unique contributions, and they all like sailing a boat, not everyone is the captain, not everyone is pulling the sails in, all of those types of things. We've all got our own role, but we all know that we're heading in the same direction. And I think that is one of the troubles, is when the people who are hosting the sales are so busy saying, why doesn't everyone understand what an important skill this is to hoist the sales, then we're not appreciating the skills that other people have on that team. And they're not appreciating us, and there's conflict, and then we don't get anywhere. Or worse, we get thrown overboard. So I think this whole focus on us working together to achieve business outcomes is the essence of not only our survival, but our organisation's survival, and actually potentially is going to take the conflict away. Because it's less about how does the IT department install my new learning management system, and it's more about how do I work with the IT department to understand what pressures they're under, what kind of technologies they're already using to help you talk about this a lot, Tom, about where I can go and work with the technologies where people are already hanging out, and work in partnership with the IT department rather than in conflict with them. And then you'll probably find that they're very willing to actually embrace some of the new ideas that you're bringing into that process and want to support you in the same way that you want to support them. So, I do think we have to change our focus and direction, and we'll be appreciated so much more, and also we'll learn to value ourselves and our contribution into that world.
Agree completely. Any other closing thoughts, Laura, as we sign off on what has been a long few weeks of streaming and talking about COVID? Everyone's sick of COVID now, probably, but still.
As long as they're sick of and not sick from, then that's the most important.
So the only thing for me is just everybody, please just view the current circumstances as an opportunity. There have been numerous, global situations, whether it's world wars or a race to find something first, where other industries have benefited from things that can be seen from the outset, or at least at the start of those things, as quite traumatic and quite challenging. Where there's a great challenge for for a group of people, in this sense, the human race globally, you'd argue, in this situation, there is always opportunity, and I think L&D have a great one to shake things up and approach things from new ways and experiment. I think we've used that term a fair amount, haven't we, Laura, on stream, but experiment with ways that you can do things differently. Hopefully what we've said across this whole series and the webinar last week and this final wrap-up session has given you some ideas, but Laura and I are always keen to continue the discussion, so you can just see how passionate she is about certain topics and the ones that we've touched on. So please hook up with us on LinkedIn. Laura is also active on Twitter, I believe. I think she is. So I didn't want to commit to her and then she has to start tweeting now. But no, she's active on Twitter. And essentially the virtual door is always open for a conversation. So please reach out to any of us, and thank everybody for joining in and contributing across the last few weeks on these streams and webinars. It's been very, very important and much appreciated.
And I've enjoyed journeying with you, Tom, on this one. So I want to say thank you for inviting me. And we're all on the same journey. Let's carry on moving forward together. So thank you very much.
Excellent. Well, thank you for everybody, and we will see you on the next webinar, whenever that is. But other than that, stay safe and good rest of the week.